Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is a down and dirty Z50R. Alright, last time we left off, we had the suspension on the frame. I'm really not that much further ahead. All I've done here is taken the axle that came with this fork kit and I sent it through the rim out the other side, and I placed the spacer that came with this kit in between the rotor and the fork. There's the end of the axle. It doesn't matter if it's tight. That distance right there, that's what matters. When everything is snug to that side, as if it were tight, this spacer sets the distance for your brake pads. It's kind of hard to see upside down here, but this is my caliper. Okay, underneath you have your brake pads. This one still has the safety in it so that it doesn't get accidentally triggered and then bound up. If we take this caliper and we were to put it in place, I'm like through the fork and reaching over here, guys. Try to get you. All right, that is going to set the distance that the caliper needs to be at in order for it to be lined up with the rotor. You know what I mean? The rotor has to go in between those two pads. So that spacer has to stay the same. If we were to use their little speedo gear, that would go on under here, and the two tangs go over this piton. Well, if we don't need this, we're also not going to need that piton. I'm going to be grinding mine off. Reason being, because I want to use this spacer. It's a little bit too long. I'm going to have to grind it back, but it fits inside of that seal and up against the bearing. It's very solid and it's very simple. So that's what we're going to do for the front. In the back, well, it's going to get into some drum brakes, and I believe this one is just the drum goes against the swing arm, right, so that the tangs can grab this piton, and then obviously that would set the distance for your wheel to the right. Not much in the way of flex going on here, guys. So once your wheel is on here, everything's to the right, your brake is set, it's up against this. We can measure this distance and we can make a spacer, because we are definitely missing the other one that I'm guessing probably looked something like this. I just zeroed out my caliper. I'm now going to measure the speedometer gear housing. You notice on this side it's solid. That goes all the way through to this face over here. So that is the length that we need. That will give us a proper spacer. I'm hitting that 28.73, 28.74. I could use a new battery in this. If I measure the factory spacer from my Z50R clone, I'm coming in at a whopping 30.07. So we need to find the difference between the two and subtract it from this one. Remember, there's two sides to the spacer. One end fits inside that nice little seal there. So we're going to be taking it off of, oh, I guess we could go in, but we're just going to take it off the fat side. I'm hoping I can do this with a grinder. Looks like I got about another millimeter to go. I'm just putting this in the vise, the fat side up, and then lightly running my grinder over the top of it. We'll let Big Herc handle the heavy work. Once it gets close, we'll call in Kyle the File to finish the job. Let's see how he did. Dang it, Kyle! It took a little too much. But, you know, I think that little much is going to make getting this in a whole lot easier. We're now talking, you know, thousandths away from being exactly the same as this. If we need to add a washer, we can. If we need to take more and add a washer, we can too, but it's really not going to be that, you know, big an issue. We now take our spacer with our newly trimmed end facing out. The smaller end goes into the seal and it will bottom out against that bearing. That's solid. On the other side, we have that smaller spacer. Same thing. It is also going to bottom out against that bearing. Wham bam la jam. Now, when our axle passes through, everything should be solid straight across. And hopefully our rotor will line up with our caliper. Since I'm deleting the speedometer, I'm also cutting off the old piton here. Dremel with a micro disc. Want to handle that, no problem. Eye protection, plenty of ventilation. Already cleaned up the dust. This actually took a second to cut through, so whatever process they did in forming the castings for these tubes, I'd say they did a-okay. At least on that piton, man. She's sweet. Oh well. I'll finish cleaning this up with the file. I'm not going crazy here. I'm just rounding it off so that all the edges are nice and smooth. You won't see it anyway. Since the fork isn't tight, I can spin it around. And I'll smack it with a little high heat grill paint. This one is silver. That's all. Just the bare stuff. I just saved you all kinds of agony. That got awkward really quick. I had to lift it up on my shoulder. I had the fork just swinging in the breeze. But I was able to give her the shish kebab. And our end result is looking mighty fine. We're pretty centered right there. These spacers being inserted into those seals made a world of difference. Having that little bit of extra play on this side, that may have helped too. Hopefully it didn't hurt anything, because now we have to figure out if the rotor lines up with the pads on the caliper. First, you have to remove the small wedge that is holding the brake lever shut on the reservoir itself. That way it releases. Once it does that, you can then pull this tab out in the back, and we're going to keep that one too, but I don't think we're going to get it in the way they had it. The idea here, you don't want to engage this while there's nothing in between those pads. So I'm going to be super careful with it. I don't have any risers or handlebars hooked up yet. Even if I did, I'm not sure this cable would be long enough for what we're going to do. I'm just going to try my best to wiggle around in here. This kit came with 2 of these bolts, and I think these are the ones that go through here, and then they would thread into the housing on the caliper. I'll give you a minute to figure out what you're staring at. I have the axle torqued to, forearm spec. It feels good. Same with these. So if I find some specs and I go back and give these the proper tech thunder, then I'll let you know. In the meantime, I'm going to reach over, I'm going to lift it up, I'm going to give it a spin. Those are fresh brake pads. It's barely rubbing. We're tight on the axle, and we still have to tighten these and bring all of this home. So, yeah, buddy. When you're looking at the 2 drum brakes side by side, you'll notice that one mechanism has a short arm, the other one has a long arm. The short arm is for the front, the long arm is for the rear. It seems to be in working order, and it'll probably work a lot better with some new shoes and springs. I got these over on the Zon. Got a 2-pack actually, and they look like just the thing we're looking for. I'm going to take these ones off and attempt to clean this mechanism. Without the brake shoes, there's not a whole lot going on. just have a lever that's connected to this piece that goes between the two shoes. When you twist it, it pushes these apart, and when those push apart, the shoes press against the outside of the drum. The drum is connected to the wheel right now. I'll still clean that up the best I can. A little dish soap and some warm water cleaned it up pretty good. I then doused it down with some brake clean and then put the WD to my moving part. I also put a little bit on this thing here and then wiped it off good. I'm going to wipe everything off one more time and then I'll put the brake shoes in. Everything looks nice and orderly. You can see that my brake shoes are not exceeding the radius of the housing, and when we pull the lever, we have a beautifully smooth action, just like new. Make sure your arm is facing that way, because when you hit the brake lever down and it pulls the rod, you want it to go towards that away. The drum is in really good shape. I'm going to rough it up with some fine sandpaper and then hit it with a rag and some lacquer thinner. Looking even better. That only took me a couple minutes. It's worth it when it comes to this kind of stuff to, you know, go the extra mile. Spins, doesn't spin. Spins, doesn't spin. Pretty sweet. The Swingarm has these cool little slide adjusters. I'm going to stick my axle bolt in the same way I did on the front, so we're going to go that direction. I'll be sure to stick my axle through this one, and then it'll go in through the brake side and out the sprocket side. At that point, I'm going to pass it through the frame and I'll put my nut and washer on it after the other adjuster. We're going to pull it this direction and then take a look at the space that's left on the other side. Right now I have my axle through and I'm tightening my nut. What I'm looking to do is take that little bit of plate you just saw. I'll try to get it on this side. See that? I'm just going to tighten it until that's gone. Once that's gone, I'm going to pull my wheel all the way to the left so that my hub is touching right here. I should say the end of the brake drum mechanism. Alright, when that's touching the swing arm and that play isn't there, I'm going to try to get a measurement over here. This is not easy. Okay, so I ended up with 5/8 of an inch between the face of my sprocket and the face of my swing arm when I had the play completely out of the axle from side to side. So I wasn't torquing anything in. I was just coming to that measurement. I know that that's square here, and everything else should work out. This is sort of a gamble, but it has to be done. I do not have the stock spacer. I could get one, but let's see if we can't be crafty. Knowing that I have 5/8, we now need to know what we have from the face of the sprocket to the face of the bearing race in there. So we set a spacer that fits over our axle and also conveniently in that nice little seal. It's bottomed out. Now I'm going to transfer a line from the side of, well, I'll call it the face of my sprocket onto the side of this spacer. And then we can take that measurement from the end of the spacer to that line. Isn't this convenient? If I pull the one to the end of our spacer, you can see that 3/8 is a pretty safe bet. If we add our initial 5/8 to 3/8, that is 8/8. That's 1 inch, guys. So I'll just mark off 1 inch, and I'll have to cut this thing somehow. No, I'm really asking for trouble. I haven't cut this yet. I found a 1 inch spacer that fits even better, except, yeah, I gotta bore that out. Oh, baby. I'm gonna see if I can do this without breaking my wrist. We're using a vise and a cordless hand drill. It's not too shabby. Maybe a little off center, but the hole's straight. That's what counts, right? And it also fits. So I'll take my file to the edge just to get any burrs out of there, and then give it a shot. Oh yeah, just like that, we're back in action. Everything feels good on the brake. We have our piton in the groove. We're flush with our brake up against the swing arm. This bolt is tight. I'm not sure if it's square, only because it's difficult to get to that tensioner while it's up on the workbench. But this thing with the spacer pushed into that seal was very snug going into the swing arm. So when I tightened it, there wasn't any flex. I think that is exactly what we want. That means that our measurement from the inside of our shock, top and bottom, should still be the same, right? Everything's straight, and our chain alignment is going to work off of the brake side. So as long as we're factory there and we're factory here, we should be good to go. Now that we have a roller, we can put it back down on the ground. That's going to make it a lot easier to tighten up these 3 bolts on the top plate. I know this sounds crazy, but the first thing you're going to do is remove the top plate and then check for any play in your neck. You want to make sure everything's snug now that you can lift up and put it down. I can feel, and you can almost see, just a little bit of play there. So I'm going to give this nut a couple more twists. I'm not talking about the play that's up here in the forks either, because these clamps aren't even tight. It's just a little up and down that was right here. It didn't even take maybe a half turn and a little quarter scooch. I got it. I put the top plate back on. I had to push my fork tubes down a little bit because the clamps are still loose. These bolts are just finger tight, but they're snug. Everything's flush, okay? This one is tightened good and plenty. I did that with a large adjustable wrench. At this point, the height is controlled by the top plate, and the parallel is at the axle in the fork. So everything is straight, it's square. Now we can tighten our clamps. Once my clamps are tight and they're holding my tubes firmly in place, I'm going to come up and put about 30 foot-pounds of the Torque Thunder on each one of these bolts. Once those are done, I'm going to come back and give that one a twist. Probably get a quarter turn or something out of it once those are set. After that, I'm then going to back these bolts off. You can see the head of them there. One more time. What that's going to do is relieve the tension that you just created between the top plate and the lower clamp. It's unneeded, so we'll take it out of there just by backing this off and then tightening it again. Nothing else moves. It's just its most natural state. Now we're cooking. It's still not quite a roller though. It's missing a seat and the handlebars. The seat's not in yet, so the last thing we're going to do today is install these Pro Taper XR50 handlebars. These are in SE, so they're 7/8. They're mini bike bend. I've used them before because, well, it's the same pair. I just keep reusing them because I love them so much. Hopefully, this will be a more permanent home. It is quite fitting. We're going to be adapting these with a pair of MB200 risers. They're nice, flat black. They have those Allen heads on them, and they're pretty rugged, and I think they're going to give us the right height for these bars. The bolt that comes with these risers passes through. That way, you only have to worry about the nut on the bottom when you're tightening them. We're going to bring it down to the top plate where it fits perfectly through the hole, and unlike some other risers that I tried, these ones do not overhang the front of the top plate. I'm going to put the nuts on both of them. They're lock nuts, so I'm just going to give them the finger tighten, and then we'll put the handlebars on. we just stick our handlebars right down on top. I have my 2 caps and my 4 bolts with the wrench ready to go. Now I'm tightening my handlebars. They might be a little off. It doesn't matter. All I'm concentrating on really is bringing my clamps down evenly on the front and back. Once they're snug, we can now tighten these 2 nuts under here. Everything else will be locked in place, and as they tighten, they should pull square to the handlebars. Look at that cool guy with the wicked straight handlebars. Now I can loosen up these 4 bolts and bring them back to where I need them to be, and also center them at the same time. Yo, wouldn't this be crazy if I clip this zip tie and this is long enough to make it all the way up to these handlebars? This isn't half bad. Nice full-size handle, good squeeze. That's a half decent reservoir. The hose, that'll work. We could upgrade it, wrap it with something to keep it off our clamp and front of our frame, but we now have a fully functioning fork. Suspension, disc brakes, handlebars and all. I mean, this thing works. Good too. This unit also came with the wire for a brake light. It appears to have one Phillips screw here. If I remove that, I might be able to get this out of there without cutting it. Whoops. I'll fix that in a second. This came off no problem. It's actually completely external from the housing. This is a nice product. You know what else is nice? This 124 Lifan Performance Crate engine that we're going to install next. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.